Welcome to Dialogue, a true crime conversation. It's me, your host, Rebecca Sebastian. Welcome to the podcast. If you're new, welcome back if you've been here before. We just had an amazing series on true crime authors, writers for, vastly different, unique voices and amazing stories that they shared. That was a lot of fun, and we are switching gears. We are about to embark on a 4-week series on survivors. And just buckle up is all I can say, because each woman's story, and they are all women, is incredible and unique and yet somehow universal. So whatever you've been through in your life, because I believe we're all survivors of something most likely, and gosh, we all got through 2020. So, that's not even a joke. Like, we made it through what feels like an apocalyptic year. We've all survived. And I know there's many, many stories. We all have a story. And I'm just so excited for you to hear the next 4 weeks of interviews. And I'm thrilled to kick it off with today's guest. Today's guest is Kathy Kleiner, and she is a survivor of Ted Bundy. And that is too small of a title for this woman. She is a delight. She is an inspiration. She is hilarious and charming, and you're going to love her. And what you might not know is Kathy's been surviving since she was a little girl. So much happened to her before Ted Bundy was even a name on anyone's lips. She'd gone through and survived so much, only to have to keep surviving through that and beyond. I'm going to let you listen to her story, but it's absolutely incredible. So if you're interested in Ted Bundy and serial killers and that aspect of true crime, obviously you're going to be interested in today's interview. If you're not, you're still going to want to hear this, because her story transcends Ted Bundy. I don't think we even say his name more than a couple of times. This is truly about an extraordinary woman, and I promise you, you will leave encouraged. I'm completely humbled by this woman. I also want to mention that Tori Telfer, a 2-time guest on Dialogue, wrote a great interview with Kathy Kleiner in Rolling Stone magazine, which I'm going to link to in the show notes because it is a great article. And, just 2 of my guests being together and working together made me happy to see that in my research on Kathy. So I'm going to include that. And hopefully, if CrimeCon happens live, Kathy will be there. I know she's spoken live in the past. I've never gotten to meet her in person, but this makes me really excited to be in her presence and to hear her speak live. She has so much to offer the world. So without further ado, let's get into today's interview. But wait, I just forgot. I am keeping the Google survey up a couple more days. Thank you so much to everybody who's filled out the Dialogue survey. It's in my show notes. I'm basically just asking for your opinion on what you like about the podcast, what you would like to see more of, less of, helpful feedback, constructive criticism. I'm open to all of it. I'm shaping 2021. I've got series planned through April, but beyond that is open. So I'd really love to know what it is you'd really most like to hear, who you'd most like to hear from. So please, maybe even hit pause, go fill out that survey, or listen real quick and then go fill it out. Either way. As always, you can follow us on social media at Dialogue Pod across all platforms. And on Friday, special new podcast alert, Criminality, because loving reality TV isn't a crime, is launching with my very first episode, co-hosting with Melissa from the Moms and Murder podcast. Of course, she's also been a guest on Dialogue. So lots of exciting things coming up. I'll put that in the show notes as well. And you can keep up with me on my website, RebeccaSebastian.com, or on social media. And now, really not kidding this time, let's kill the small talk and hear from the amazing Kathy Kleiner. Kathy, welcome to Dialogue Podcast. I am so glad that we are able to speak today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So I wondered if, before we get to your story that involves the infamous Ted Bundy, could you talk a little bit about the adversity you faced as a child and how you started having to survive at such a young age?
Thank you again for allowing me to tell my story. I am very honored, so thank you. My background, I was born in Miami, and my daddy died when I was 5. This was something that I didn't understand, but my world had changed overnight. And my new normal now, I thought, was just mom and my siblings. My mom remarried, and I was adopted by my stepfather, who is wonderful. When I was in 6th grade during the year, I became very lethargic. I had a low grade fever and just tired all the time. Toward the end of the year, Mama took me to the pediatrician, who knew something was wrong with me, but didn't know what. They sent me to a specialist down in Miami to do tests. And again, not knowing what it was, they just needed to check out things. I ended up going into hospital that day for 3 months. I stayed in the hospital after my 6th grade. That was very trying. Again, they didn't know what was wrong with me. They took tests, and they finally figured out that I had systemic lupus erythematosus. That's a form of lupus that attacks your organs as well as your blood and other things that it destroys. I was very young at 13. The lupus diagnostics were not really very up to date at that point. Plus, no one my age had come down with lupus.
Wow.
So it was something that they really didn't know how to treat. After 3 months, I left the hospital, and they told my parents that I probably wouldn't make it the next year because it definitely was deteriorating my body, and they didn't know how to treat it for me. I stayed home my 7th grade of school. My mom and daddy were offered to give me experimental chemo from a doctor from Cuba. They agreed, and I was given a cocktail of chemo where I would take it every 6 weeks, and I lost all my hair. I'm at home now, 13, and I'm homebound. I have a home teacher that comes visits. I have no hair. I'm sick. My parents were working, and it was just not a very pleasant time for me. I used to get so bored by not talking to people. I dialed 0 just to talk to the operator. And, they were, most of the time they were very nice and would talk to me. But this, I thought, was going to be my new normal.
Right.
And, I just fought it. I fought it in my head, and I just prayed and said, this is not going to be me forever. I don't want to live like this. Being homebound the year, I finally tried to get out of the house, and I told Mama I'd like to go to church. She goes, church? Yes, that's a great idea. So I got all dressed up, and we went to church on Sunday. Afterwards, went and got ice cream and took me right home after that. Well, not 2 weeks later, I came down with shingles.
Oh, gosh.
So I am just really puny at this point. Shingles actually attacked and was shown up on my neck and my side of my face. Finally, that year ended. I was getting healthier. The chemo had helped me. My body was getting stronger, and my mental state was getting a lot stronger as well. I knew I was turning the circle, and now I was looking forward to what my new life and what lay ahead. I was so excited to get out of the house and be strong, and I had a positive attitude because I didn't want to go back to where I was, and I knew I didn't have to.
Wow. Can I ask a couple questions about the medical side of lupus? Like the form that you had, how rare is that? I think lupus isn't all that common, and then the form you had sounds extremely rare.
Yes, it is. I don't know exactly what percentage does have the erythematosus type, although at 13, they knew no one that had it. So their treatment was pretty radical, just to see if they could keep me alive and see if it would help.
And were you able to maintain friendships during that year, or were you completely disconnected because it was too risky for you to be around other kids?
It was very risky for me. I would look out the window, and again, I was not feeling well. I was always wanting to be in bed or, just hang out and watch soap operas on TV. And it was just, I would look out and see the kids, and it got to be so, they didn't look in the window and say hi anymore because they were playing and doing their old thing. So I did lose track of us, almost all of my my elementary school friends.
Wow. Oh, that's so much for an adolescent, coming of age. The social connection is so important, and that got really severed for you, through no fault of your own. So what happens next? You get healthier, you get stronger, and is it now around high school time or?
Yes, I actually went to high school down at Fort Lauderdale High, and I couldn't do anything strenuous because of lupus. I couldn't take PE, so I took theater.
Oh,
That
okay.
was the best decision I had made because it opened me up, and I made new friends, and I could act, and I could be anything and anyone I wanted to be, except that sick little kid
Mm,
that was 13 and homebound.
yeah.
So that was not who I was anymore. I was now an actress or whatever I wanted to be in theater. It was a great opening, a great new beginning for me. And I made such good friends that come back in my life over the years that have been special to me, and very, one of them being Susie White. And then I was real good friends with Scott Rubin and several others. But those are the ones that stand out more.
Theater kids are amazing, right? I feel like they're an especially accepting bunch. I was in theater in high school and college, and I feel like there's just something about kids who are into performing arts that really it's a strong bond, and everybody's a misfit kind of in their own way, but collectively there's strength in numbers, and you just feel more yourself and free, you know?
Yes, definitely. And I know as I joined as a freshman, no one knew me because of being home. And my theater teacher told a couple of the kids, you be her friend. She doesn't know anyone.
Oh,
Make sure she doesn't eat lunch by herself. And these actually became my best friends ever.
yes. Oh.
So with them, well, we don't want to be her friend, but it worked out well, and we learned to love each other, and it was a great relationship after that.
Oh, thank God for the adults in place and the teachers who facilitate things like that. It's so hard being the new kid or the one nobody knows or who moves from another community. And sometimes it does take an adult setting up those friendships or the introductions, and you hope it works out. But that's great. I'm so glad you had that experience.
Exactly. And the kids did not know my background. They didn't treat me any
Oh,
different
good.
because, they didn't know my history. So I was just one of the gang, which made me feel good, and, was, like I said, starting my life over again.
Now, were your parents protective of you at this point? I would imagine you've gone through so much already. They're probably nervous to let you out in the world. Were they your average parents letting you do your thing as a teenager, or were they hovering?
Hovering is too loose of a word. Mama's Cuban, and she just is very, you're right. Everything I went through, she was just like, put me in a little bubble
Yeah.
and, didn't let me move around since I had been so sick, and they gave me a term of how long I would live. She just, I mean, one of the other things with lupus is you're not supposed to be in the sunshine.
Oh,
It's one of the things that could activate it. We lived in South Florida.
oh,
I remember going out with my friends, and literally Mama would run behind me with an umbrella over my head as I walked with my friends. I mean, she was just, God love her.
yeah. I mean, you're literally in the Sunshine State. Isn't that Florida? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, God.
Yes.
That's just,
Yes,
oh,
exactly.
it's like poetic. It's almost, tragic.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you can't
Yes.
blame her. I mean, you were so vulnerable and she's being mama bear. I get it.
Yeah, totally.
So then what is lupus? Is it curable? Is that still a diagnosis of yours? And did you have to have treatments through high school, or what did it mean to live with lupus?
Living with lupus has been off and on for me. I am in remission now.
Good.
I've had it kind of come up in different times in my life under stress, and emotional strain is something that they say avoid because it could activate the lupus. And also don't have children.
Mm.
That was one of the things I was always told. There are treatments now, and as mine goes in and out, it's weird because it's not supposed to just go away by itself. but I think the trauma of things that happened in my life kind of activated, and I become very tired and my joints ache, and I just don't want to do anything because everything hurts.
Wow.
But right now I'm in remission, which is a wonderful
Yeah,
thing.
so glad to hear that. And isn't the mind-body connection so interesting?
Oh my goodness, yes.
I always
Totally,
think
yes.
about that. I'm obviously not a doctor, but I find, when they can point to evidence that this really will be exacerbated by stressors or triggers, just how much there's just a holistic approach to the body. It really does feel and take on what's happening around you.
I totally agree with you. And I think when I made my decision up that I had had enough of staying home and I'd seen enough soap operas, that my mindset did turn around. And I was going to fight now because I wasn't going to lay down and say, okay, I'm going to be like this the rest of my life. So that's when I think I turned around in my head and fought my way out of what I was going through. And then when I got shingles, it kind of put me back a little bit,
Ugh,
but that too ended.
right.
And, so life went on. And in high school, I was happy as could be.
Right. And then you graduate, you get into college. And was it hard to convince mom that you could go live on campus, or was that an agreed upon event?
It was very hard
Yeah.
to get out of the house at any point
Yeah.
during high school. I always went out with groups and everything, and I wanted to do as much as I could just to enjoy everything there was out there. When it was time to go to college, there were friends of ours from high school that went to different colleges in the state. I loved to go to FSU because that was as far away from Miami as I could get and still pay in-state
Yep.
tuition.
Smart girl.
So that was my big goal, to go to FSU. And Mama was just, oh my gosh, we're going to move to Tallahassee.
Oh.
Of course they didn't, but it was very hard for her to let go of me. And she had to learn that I was going to be okay, and she didn't need to worry about me anymore.
Yeah. And I think that's relatable to most parents have that. You had the added trauma of having a real grave illness in your adolescence. And of course, she would never know and you would never know what was going to happen to you. But that sort of is every parent's worst fear. And I just hard to get my mind around that ended up something so unexpected and something so rare happened to you. So you convince mom, you go to Florida State. And is it your first year you join your sorority? How does that all play out?
I joined the sorority as a pledge in the fall of 1976.
Okay.
They have a thing they do at campuses when a young girl, a freshman, want to join a sorority. They call it Rush.
Yep.
And the women go to different sororities. We're all dressed up, and we visit a sorority for about 10 minutes. We tell them about us, and they tell us about the sorority house. And then we move on and go to another sorority. And during the week that it lasts, it's narrowed down so that the sorority chooses who they want to be a pledge. And if that person said, I want to join Chi O, then that was the match. But if they didn't match, if Chi O wanted someone and the girl didn't have them as their choice, then there would not be, she would not be able to join a different sorority. I was lucky enough to be offered to become a sister and a pledge at Chi Omega. It was exciting, and I didn't understand, but it was great that Susie White, my friend from high school, was actually a member of Chi O. And for her to give them a detail of me and know that I would be the complete fit that they wanted as a sister, that helped me move along to become a pledge at Chi Omega.
Yeah, so I didn't realize, I sort of know how the sorority system works. I didn't realize it was such of almost like a matchmaking situation. Not only do you have to be chosen, but you have to choose them. They're really looking for compatibility.
Yes, totally.
Very cool. So was she ahead of you, Susie, in years? She was older?
Yes, she was a year ahead of me.
Okay. So within the sorority, were those your people? Did you find your closest friendships there?
When I became a pledge, I had joined a small church group before that, right when I got to campus. And it was the Wesley Foundation. And it was just a bunch of college kids. And we enjoyed the hanging out and playing pool and doing that kind of stuff, going to movies together. So when I became a pledge to Chi O, there are certain activities that we perform in order, to be part of the group. We have to go to class, and we have to have special dinners and talk to the house mother, and just a lot of things that we had to go through, as well as learning all the rules and the background of the sorority. When I was doing so much with them, I wasn't able to do as much with the church group. So I was kind of torn, but Chi O was my love.
Yeah.
So I did everything I could with Chi O.
Okay. So you attended college, you left in the fall of 1976, and
yes.
So it was 1978. Is it your second semester? It would be like the beginning of the year, right? Right after Christmas break?
Yes. To back up a little bit, when I first joined, when I went to FSU, I moved into a dormitory, which my mom was, the idea just upset her. But they allowed me to join an all-women's dorm.
Right.
So that it was not a co-ed. I was on the third floor. It was so strict up there that guys couldn't even come to pick up their dates or anything when they were going to go out. I remember they would have panty raids downstairs on the first and second floor, and we'd hear all the excitement. We'd run and get our panties and throw them down the stairwell and go, I'm on a panty raid. But it was fun. I was just delightful, and it was fun to be there.
Yeah.
Mom and Daddy thought it wasn't as safe for me to live there, obviously, that there was not enough security or responsibility, and it was just not their first thought for me to go to a dorm. But not being a co-ed, they thought it would be okay.
Sure.
So I graduated. I left school for the summer in the fall of 77.
Right.
My parents made arrangements for me to move into the dormitory. To leave the dormitory and move into the Chi O house. Okay. There were only about 30 women that slept in the house because that's how many rooms they had, and there were two women per room. And the Chi O rooms were about the size of a dorm room. So it was great. My roommate was Karen, who I did not know too well because just starting and being a sister. So we got to know each other well, and it was a good time for me. I can't even think of the angst my parents must have gone through, making sure I got into the safe sorority house where they locked the door at 10 o'clock, and there was a house mother on campus. And I just can't imagine what they went through. But the fall of 77, I was in my new room in the sorority house. Life was great. I was happy, and here comes a new year coming up, and I was just excited to live everything I could and just smell the flowers and understand the people, and it was also exciting for me. I was very happy when I was there at FSU.
And you'd be 20 right now at this time?
Yes, I had just turned 20.
20, okay. So I really want to honor your boundaries on this, and I think most people know and will know from my introduction that you are a surviving victim of a Ted Bundy attack at FSU. This was, I believe, his last crime. So I want you to share as much or as little as you'd like about that night, and just really give you the complete, reins on what you want to share or not.
Thank you very much. I find that by talking and sharing my story, it has a healing effect on me. I feel like every time I do tell it, it's a healing thing. So I don't mind talking about it at all. Starting in January on the 14th, which was a Saturday, I woke up and I remember it was really, really cold out. So I put on my flannel pants, my flannel blue pants, and a big woolly sweater. That afternoon, on that Saturday, I was to go to a wedding that some friends of ours from the Wesley Foundation, the little church, were going to get married. So we went there. It was a noon wedding. We beautiful small ceremony. It was a small group of us that attended that church, and we went to the reception afterwards. And in the evening, we were all going to go to a movie after the wedding. So I went home back to the sorority house, which Florida State at that time was very safe, and it seemed very small. You could pretty much get around by bus and go anywhere. But I got home to the sorority. It was probably about 8 o'clock. I went in the front door to the foyer, and there were sorority sisters talking and chatting about what they did during the day and what they were going to do that night. And I got caught up in it and telling my story, and it was fun. It was fun coming home and having such a diverse group of women to talk to, and it was just a good time for me. I decided not to go to the movie that night. I decided to stay home and study. I went upstairs to the second floor where my room was, and my room faced the back of the sorority, and it overlooked the parking lot. We had big windows, the back of our room, looking over and outside. We always hung curtains on the curtain rods, so our windows were always open. And during the day, it let in so much light, it was beautiful. Our room was the size of a dorm, so when you walked in, parallel on each wall, we had our desk, our dresser, and then our twin beds. And my twin bed headboard leaned against the bank of windows on the back wall. I studied in the bed for a couple hours and decided it's cold out. So I remember I put on my yellow flannel nightgown and my white socks, and I crawled into bed. It was about 11:30 or 12 o'clock on January 14th. Sometime during the night, I wasn't sure what time it was, I heard our bedroom door slide across the carpet, and it hit the back wall as it opened. And it woke me up enough to startle me to the point where I was trying to focus my eyes on what I heard. The next thing I hear is this big stumble and all this noise. Between our twin beds, we had a little trunk. It was like a footlocker, and we put our books, and I had my glasses, and it had blankets in there. Our room was dark, and this person stumbled over that. Now that woke me up, and I was really trying to focus on what I was seeing. All I could see was a silhouette of someone standing next to me, someone big. I'm laying in bed and looking, and as I'm looking, I see this dark figure open up his arm up over his head. He had something in his hand I couldn't see because it was so dark. And then in an instant, he slammed me in the face, which turned out to be a piece of firewood, an oak log that he had picked up on his way into the sorority house. When he hit me, the feeling was more like a thud. It didn't hurt. It was weird. It was just a heavy pressure that I felt. And then he went and he hit me again, and now I'm hurting. Now it really hurts. During this time, Karen, my roommate, started to move around. She too heard the noise, and she started to wake up. So this person went back over to the side of her bed and hit her also with the same log. When he was hitting her, he heard me stumbling and screaming and to the top of my lungs. But all he really heard was guggling and gurgling sounds because my jaw had been severed and was broken in several pieces. And I had almost bit my tongue off, which was now swollen. And the blood in my mouth, I couldn't talk. In my head I was, but I really wasn't making noise. This person came back to my side of the bed and raised his arm again to hit me. And I'm curled up in the smallest little ball I could be in. And I'm scritching and I'm holding on and just tied up in a ball. And my I'm sorry, my eyes are clenched as hard as I could do it because I knew the next blow was coming and I didn't know if I would live through that next one. At that same moment, there was a light that illuminated our room. It lit up enough so even in my state of clenched eyes, I could see the light, and I opened them more. And as I did, the room was really illuminated. The light came in through our open curtains, and I could see better this person that struck me and that hit me so hard. And he was like really spooked. He was moving around, kind of real antsy. And then he ran out of the room. And it turned out that the lights started to go dim again.
Oh,
Those lights were from a car that had pulled into the back parking lot and led a sorority sister home from a date that night. Those lights saved my life.
yeah.
And this person ran out of our room and ran out of the sorority house. As I'm laying in the bed, just hurting and again screaming, my roommate staggered out of the bedroom door and into the hallway where one of the other sorority sisters saw her. She walked her back into our room, turned on the light, and just was horrified at the sight of the blood and me rocking up and down and holding my face and blood everywhere. So they called 911 at that point. It seemed like forever. I laid there in my bed. Another sorority sister hung on to me and just tried to console me as I hurt so bad. I remember it seemed like forever, but a police officer was the first person I saw. The first thing that I thought was going to save me was his presence next to me. I knew a cop was not going to let this person come back and hit me again. As confused and scared and as much as I hurt, I had a bit of peace that I was safe now from this one person that had attacked me and done this to me.
Oh my gosh, Kathy. I'm just kind of letting it all sink in. I know at the time you certainly wouldn't have had a concept of time, but now that you know more about the crime scene and the event, how long is this all between the time he entered your room to the time the police officer came? Do you have an idea?
I was told by as they did the investigation, that it was less than maybe 5 minutes.
Wow.
That's how quick it was. When Bundy, whom we didn't know who it was at first, attacked us, he had first gone and attacked two of my sorority sisters.
Yeah.
One of them being Margaret Bowman, who's beautiful. She was a year older than I and just very polished and cosmopolitan and beautiful. And he had killed Margaret. He strangled her with a pair of pantyhose. He also beat her with that same club, that same piece of firewood that he had attacked me and my roommate with. After he attacked Margaret, he walked across the hallway, and there laid Lisa Levy. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
She had been, she was also attacked and beaten with the same club that he beat us with. And he also raped her and bit her and left her for dead. And it was after he left Lisa's room, that's when he came to our room. So this guy had already killed two sorority sisters. And he was now coming into our room. And he was in such a state of, I don't know, a frenzy of just out of control, that when he came to our room, he was in a vicious state, and what he was doing was going to be very violent. And that's why I think when he hit us, he did it with such force that it really hurt really bad.
When did you find out that Margaret and Lisa were killed just prior to him entering your room? When in the timeline of your events did that fact make its way to you?
When I was in the hospital for about a week, I was flown back home to Miami with my parents. And it was sometime a week or so after the attack that they did now tell me about Margaret and Lisa. So it was a couple of weeks after the attack that I learned that they died.
She's Birdie is back, and I couldn't be happier about it. Dialogue is doing a 4-part series on survivors, and what better sponsor than She's Birdie to help us all be more prepared to survive should something unexpected happen to us. She's Birdie is a personal alarm that is most importantly easy to use and effective. The alarm is super loud and easy to activate when you need to, but impossible to activate accidentally. That's really important. Not as important, but worth mentioning, they're really cute. The founders worked hard to design a product you don't mind wearing on your handbag or your gym bag or car keys. Each one comes with a gorgeous brass ring, and the alarms come in fun colors, but also charcoal if you aren't into fun colors. Hi. And there's new colors coming later this spring. And if all of that weren't enough, She's Birdie gives back every time you buy one. To date, they have donated $50,000 to local women's shelters and to assist in changing legislation to protect victims of abuse and violence. Don't wait. Prepare yourself and the people you want to protect in your life with a She's Birdie personal alarm now. Dialogue listeners get 10% off when they use the code DIEHARD. DIEHARD. Go to shesbirdie.com and use the code DIEHARD for 10% off at checkout. Chirp loudly. Oh my gosh. Okay, there's so much here. I can only imagine, or I can't imagine, all the ways your head is spinning, and I'm thinking of your poor parents. So can you talk to me about your family's response to this? Obviously, they came by your side. You had to be hospitalized. Your injuries were very serious. What did they have to say? I mean, were they furious with the university? Talk to me about that.
Well, as you said, it was the worst call that a parent could have, was that I was attacked in the sorority house. And this was early on the morning of Sunday, the 15th. The attack actually happened between 3 and 3:15. That's how long it took for him to kill Margaret and Lisa and to attack us. I understand when someone is in that frame of mind that it only takes minutes for him to complete what he wants to complete and then go to the next one. And I thought it would have taken a lot longer, but my parents were called from Miami, and they were on the next plane up to Tallahassee, as well as my good best girlfriend, Nora. She and my parents were also on the plane, and they were just all in shock and not knowing what they were going to find. All they knew is that I had been hurt in the sorority house and that they needed to come and come to the hospital to see me. When my parents came, I remember I was so wrapped up in bandages. My face and my jaw was broken. It had been wired shut. My cheek was also slit open. When he attacked me with the log, he actually slit my mouth open from the corner of my mouth to up to my ear. So it flapped open and you could actually see my mouth and my teeth inside the hole. So that was also bruised and bandaged, and I was just nothing but a big bruise and a bandaged head. And I remember my mom just screaming, just screaming. I don't remember seeing her that well, but I'll never forget that scream. And Dad came over and was holding Mom, and they came over and they were holding me, and it was just, everyone was holding everyone for the first few minutes. And then they walked back and stepped back and composed themselves. And they were I just can't imagine seeing your daughter in that state of mind of what they had already been through with lupus. It was a bad time for them. They did not blame the FSU. They did not blame them. They did hold, though, Caio responsible for allowing this person to come into the sorority that night. The back door most of the girls entered through by the parking lot was broken. The combination lock wasn't working that night. So this person watched two of the sorority sisters just go to the back door, open it up, and walk into the house. So as he saw that, he picked up the piece of firewood that was stacked next to the back door, and that's when he opened the door and walked in the house and had free reign of the house. He just walked around until he went up the stairs and came into our bedrooms.
And prior to this, there'd been no attacks, security issues. This was as rare and out of the ordinary as could be, correct?
Correct. I mean, Florida State was as safe as any other university, and it was back in the 70s, and we were taught to be cautious and to walk 2 by 2, if we left the library at night. So just, precautious things that we used to do. So that was our experience at first, walking 2 by 2 to be safe at this sorority, to go in and to be safe to walk on campus.
So how cognizant of all the facts as they unfold are you? Are the police staying in close communication with you and asking you questions? Do you know about other survivors, your roommate? Where and how does that all unfold for you?
I was taken to the hospital, Tallahassee Memorial. I was in intensive care for the week. The whole time I was there were detectives and police officers next to my bed trying to talk to me and asking anything that I remembered, anything I could give them that would help them to go through and try to decide or discover or anything, information. And my mouth wired shut, my head bandaged. I just couldn't speak, and I didn't have anything to say because I hadn't really seen anything. And it was at this point that they had 2 psychiatrists come into my room and hypnotize me. This was a way that I would be able to see and talk more what actually happened that night, where I might have blocked off the thoughts. This allowed me to remember things. I was writing on a piece of paper, yellow notepad, as they asked me questions and what I saw and what I remembered. And that actually opened up my mind to hearing this person open my bedroom door and stumble over the trunk. This let me know what happened by being hypnotized. Other than that, I was like, I have no idea what happened. I was in that state of mind where my mind just closed it off.
Sure. I'm sure that's a trauma response.
Yes. And it was good for me to have done this because I think it made me have some power to know that this really happened. It's not something I can imagine in my head what really happened or what might have happened. It was something that I remembered particularly, and it actually helped me to understand why I was there. And I did ask immediately for my good friends that were both in different sororities. I asked if they were okay, and then I asked about Karen, my roommate. And then I just remember going in and out of, medication, and drugs really helped me relax, and kind of went into that mode of just, passing out, I guess is a good word for it. But, drug-induced sleep.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure. I don't know how, I would imagine it would be pretty difficult to fall asleep naturally on your own for a good bit of time in the weeks after.
Yes.
Did that ever turn out to be a problem you had later in life, even, years later? Do you have trouble going to sleep?
No, I really don't. When I was first attacked, I got married 6 months after the attack. And I remember I always slept with a huge wrench under my bed, and to me that was safe. Although when this person came in, I didn't know it. I didn't know that he had come into my room.
Right.
And I thought having that huge wrench under my bed would, it's all the protection I needed.
Right.
But I have really had no problem sleeping. I have in my head, I've understood everything that's happened, and I have no fear of being attacked again like that. Of course, things do hit every now and then, but I've never had a problem with sleeping. It's been delightful to fall asleep and have normal dreams.
Oh, what a gift. I'm so glad. And would you attribute that to doing the work of recovery and healing? Or do you think that's just a sort of natural way you're wired to sort of push through that way?
I think both. I think by understanding and knowing what happened, let my mind go into a safe place, if that makes sense. It
Yeah.
allowed me to understand what had happened. And I wasn't afraid to go to sleep because I had the comfort of understanding and what really happened. I can't say that enough because it's hard to remember sometimes. And I found if I face it and I know that I was attacked and I know I was beaten and I knew my jaw was wired, it kind of gave me a feeling of, okay, I know what happened. I don't have to dream and pretend what happened.
Yeah.
That it did release me and let me sleep.
Yeah, I think the unknown is a lot scarier and you can feel more out of control.
Yes.
So naming it probably gave you some peace.
Yes.
So you get married. Do you go back to FSU? Do you finish there?
I do not. I was married 6 months, like I said, after the attack in June, and we ended in divorce. But I think anyone I had married, it wasn't the right time nor the
Right.
right fit.
So can you talk to me about when you found out Ted Bundy got captured and how on your radar was the next movements of his and, his arrest and confessions? How much were you paying attention and when did you find out everything else?
Living in Miami, my parents were very protective of me. They didn't want me to watch the news and get upset by things that were going on. I remembered I'd sit to read the newspaper and there were all these articles cut out of it, so I didn't have a full page to
Oh
read. It
my
was
gosh.
missing articles, and Mama didn't want me watching the news and stuff. So I caught up again on all the same soap operas I was watching when I was 13.
Still going, those
And yes,
storylines.
still going. It was, the same storyline. It was a time of me healing and them not wanting me to know too much to have it hurt me.
Sure.
They did catch up with Bundy a couple of weeks after he had attacked us. Right after he left FSU, he went down to the middle of the state and he attacked little 12-year-old Kimberly Leach.
Yes.
He attacked her and killed her and left her in a pig pen to die. He was leaving Florida, was driving out of the state, was going through Pensacola, and he was stopped by a police officer for a traffic violation. That was the big extent of his capture. He was able to elude the police by saying he was this person's name or this guy's name because he had stolen so many credit cards from the kids at FSU that they didn't know who he was. They didn't know Ted Bundy very much. He was not on the radar here in Florida. He was
Right.
out west.
Yeah.
So even though the police had heard about him, they didn't expect him to be in Florida.
Sure.
They arrested him, and it was a couple days before they identified him, and was so surprised that he had gone to Tallahassee. And his method, the way he killed us and attacked us, was so different than the way he had attacked in the Northwest. So it was difficult for them to put all the pieces together. But Ken Casares was the sheriff in Tallahassee at the time, and he was wonderful. He kept us up to date as far as what was happening with the case and how it was going on.
And when were you notified to testify at the trial?
The trial was a year later after the attack, and it was June of 1979. I was asked to testify, of course, and it was a big traumatic experience for me to think about it, to think about having to go into the courtroom and talk about what had happened to me. I remember the morning I was going to go to trial. My mama made me a big breakfast, and the last thing I wanted to do was eat breakfast. And she goes, "No, you're going to eat your breakfast." I ate my breakfast, and then it was time to get dressed. I'm like, gosh, what do I wear? And I looked in my closet and I picked out the brightest red dress I could find
Oh,
with a beautiful white collar on it and my pantyhose and black high heel shoes. And I wasn't going to hide from anything. This red dress I felt gave me power to to stand out and not be someone who, I'm afraid to testify. I was. My hands were always clammy and cold, and that was just a mental experience. I thought I didn't want to do, but I knew I had to do it, and I knew I could do it. So it was.
I love the decision to go all in and wear red and to, almost fake it till you make it.
Yes, exactly. That's good.
Yeah. So you go, and of course, much has been written about the fact that you probably don't have a strong visual of his actual face because it was night and you were disoriented at the first point of contact. Obviously, they know it's him, you know it's him, he knows it was him. But you weren't able to solidly identify him as, yes, that's the man. And what did that feel like, to know it was him, but to under oath not be able to say, I know that's him, even though you knew it was him? You couldn't visually say, that's who I saw.
Yes. Well, when it was actually my time to go into the courtroom to testify, I was taken to the witness box, and I looked around the courtroom, and I saw all the jurors sitting there, and they were looking at me. And then my eyes looked a little bit more, and I saw the table where the prosecution sat, and there was Larry Simpson, one of the attorneys, and some other gentlemen who I had met because they had been in touch with us, Mom and Daddy and I, kind of keep us in tune of what was going on. And my eyes went a little bit further, and I saw the defense table. And right on the corner of the defense table was Ted Bundy. Mm-hmm. And he was sitting there with a smug look on his face. And he just looked at me. And once I saw him, my eyes stopped looking around, and I focused on him. And I wasn't afraid. For some reason, I felt kind of a feeling of, I'm on this good side and you're on that side, and now I have control of this situation. And it was very empowering for me. I was asked questions by the defense. I have no idea what the questions were. Right. And I was answering them, and then it came to the question, is this the man you saw attack you the night of January 15th? And I felt so bad inside because I wanted to help convict this guy. He had killed two of my sorority sisters and attacked Karen and myself. And I just wanted to help put that nail in his coffin. And I couldn't say it was him. So that's something I'll always feel, that I didn't help, but I couldn't. And I did the best I could by telling what I experienced that evening. So I was heartbroken and upset when I left the courtroom. And I was taken back to this little room where I was held before I went in. And I remember I felt like throwing up. I had been through so much, and my tummy was so tight that after testimony, everything, I was fine in the courtroom, but afterwards I was a mess.
Of course. I mean, you did help. I don't think you should discount your contribution of showing up there, because everybody knows, and the evidence showed what really happened. And everybody knows, most important of all, him, that he was the one. And you were just abiding by the truth and the oath that you took and said you couldn't name him and point to him, but you knew it was him, and everyone else did too. So don't diminish your role of showing up there and, taking back some of that power.
It's hard, but I do appreciate you saying that. And it's hard, but I don't dwell on it. Good. Just talking about it now just brings up the emotions again, but I don't dwell on it. It's just, it happened that way. That's the way it was. And that's the way it was, that's the way it'll always be. I'll always feel a little guilt, but.
Well, his fate was sealed. I mean, that's the good news. And he did that. So it seems like a good time to talk about something that I find so interesting and that I was really surprised by, which is that you are okay with, and you can use your words, I'm interpreting, this fascination with serial killers that some people have. And as a true crime aficionado, I actually don't have it. I find in them the least interesting of all the true crime stories. And I don't like giving them a ton of airtime. I'd much rather talk to victims or survivors. And I'm always worried we're going to cross that line of glorifying them. And there are some fans of the genre that do that. But you give a lot of room for this. And you've talked about it publicly, and I was wondering if you could share some of your thoughts about why you think this obsession, specifically with Bundy in this case, doesn't bother you, which some people might be surprised to hear.
Yes, I found that after the attack, I needed to know the facts. I need that clarity in my head. Like I said, I didn't want to make up anything, and I found that if I could read about him and learn about him as a person, then it would help me. I knew it would help me. The first book I read was Anne Rule's book, The Stranger Beside Me. I'm sorry. It was so interesting because she knew Bundy as a friend out in the West. And so she explained him as a person that was flesh and blood and made us see what he wanted us to see. Bundy was so manipulative that he presented a side of a person that was normal, that was a student in law. He was also working at a crisis phone line. But this was all fake. He was so deviant and so sick that he could make up anything he wanted to be, and people believed it. So I found that quite interesting. And the more I could read about him, his sickness, the way he was, the way he grew up, I just found it very comforting to know that I understood him. Even though what he said was a lie, I understood why he was lying. And I tried to learn his deviant behavior. I can't wrap my mind around that, but I found it interesting and fascinating to some extent, not to the point of being into it. That's all I think about. But at that time when I was healing and the first years afterwards, it was something I found healing for me because it wasn't this big boogeyman in front of me. It was Ted Bundy, his personality, who he was, what he did. And I think his fascination that is all around us now, you're right, people really go for that extreme. Bundy was the first court case. His trial was the first one that was televised back in the 70s. This just caught everyone's attention.
Right.
So his name was out there. People knew what he did, and some were on his side, obviously, and others weren't. Some wanted him to live, and others were, ready to fry him. And it was just, I found it so interesting. At the trial, there were actually young women who came and sat in the courtroom and was like goo-goo-eyed over Bundy during the trial. And I'm asked my opinion of that, and I have the same as back then. I feel sorry for them. Obviously, I think, certain things could go on. They could have not been in a relationship, and they thought, well, if I'm in a relationship or I think he likes me, he's nice and safe because he's behind bars, so it was having a relationship with a bad boy that they couldn't touch or couldn't hurt them. And also I was thinking of their issues as a mother figure, that maybe if they could get around him and be there to help him, they could heal him. And that's something I always thought of as being very interesting, because a mama wants to take care of their little boy, and they too wanted to take care of Bundy. I think reading different things about these women, I think that's probably one of the biggest excuses that I can give them for acting that way and being in possession of Bundy. But I think it was a number of things that brought his attention out to just about everyone in the States who understood anything knew of Ted Bundy.
Yeah. No, those are really interesting points you're making that I honestly haven't connected necessarily, and I appreciate those. I think they're generous, but certainly women do have a tendency. We at times do like to think we can fix somebody, even not even a serial killer, just a bad boy who could be more committed. I'll be the one that changes them, right? So yeah, this is like that to the nth degree. And you're right, there's a level of protection and safety there because they're going to be far away and removed. So it's a little bit of an experimental thing that maybe they were doing. But that groupie thing, Manson had it, Charles Manson had it, Richard Ramirez. It's a bizarre psychology. I am curious about the psychology behind it. But I also wonder if the curiosity around him and the case and the story, does it make you feel more seen and sort of going back to your earlier point about this really happened and I know it because XYZ, is that another sort of piece of evidence that makes you feel less invisible?
That's a good question. I don't want to be invisible.
Yeah.
I don't want to be whispered about or say, oh, she's the one. I want people to know that this happened.
Yeah.
And I'm okay. I went through it. I helped myself go through it as well. My family was there. And I think even if I was alone, I would have put my thoughts into this. And everything I had been through, the lupus, my daddy dying, this is just, I wasn't going to let this define me. I wanted to, it's like in theater, I wanted to be front and center.
Yeah.
And not be hidden because this happened to me. I wanted to stand up and say, yes, it did happen. And look at me now. I'm so much better.
Right. And what's interesting is that I learned you didn't speak about it publicly for a long time. And can you talk about how nobody actually asked you? Nobody seemed to want your story, or they did, but they were unsure of how to approach you. So talk about that a little bit, because that's surprising.
I think a lot of victims know when they go through something, they want to take it and do something with it. So I think a lot of victims kind of crawl into a little box or don't want to think about it and live life without it thinking it ever happened. So a lot of the journalists don't approach victims because they don't want to bring trauma back into their lives. And I guess if they leave them alone, then the person who was victimized is going to be okay. They're not going to hurt them by talking about it. It was actually in 2018 that I was approached by CNN to do an article, a TV series on Bundy, and they approached me and asked if I would be interested in talking to them. And my response was, where have you been the last 40 years? I would have talked to you a long time ago.
I was born ready. Yeah. Yeah.
But they respected the privacy of the victims. And I guess, I talk about it because, like I said, it heals me.
Yeah.
And I talked to them about it, and I learned, I had a great experience, went to New York. It was just a good experience around a bad thing. But once again, I wanted to make the best of it.
Yeah. And when you share and you feel healing from that, you invite others in to participate in that as well. Survivors, anybody who hears your story and connects in any level, that's an invitation to them as well. And so, I think you and I talked a little bit offline about the choice, a survivor's or a victim's choice to participate in that or not, that it's, kind of each her own. That decision is very personal.
Yes, definitely.
And of course, this attack by Ted Bundy would not be the last time you had to be a survivor and fight for your life once again. Can you share about your battle with cancer?
Yes, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer when I was 32. It was something that my family never had it. My grandma, we had no history of it. I went to the gynecologist because my husband, whom I met in theater in high school, Scott, we met up again and we ended up getting married. We wanted to have a baby. So I went to the doctor and said, I need a let you know I'm going to be coming to you because we're going to have a baby. And he found the lump in my breast. And he said, why didn't you tell me you had this?
Oh,
And I'm like, I didn't know. And he said, well, if you had been doing self-exams, you would have found it. And that's something that at 32, I never knew the importance of women doing self-exams.
yeah.
And how important that everyone should be doing it. You might be uncomfortable doing it, but it can save your life.
Right.
And it's something I never even thought about. So they did find it. It was the size of a pea by the time they found it. I went to different doctors to get second and third opinions, and they had to do the biopsy and figure out what kind of cancer it was. So it was maybe a month or so before I decided to go in. I had to do a radical mastectomy, which is when they take out the breast tissue, and then they also take out your lymph nodes under your armpits and down your arm, because these can harbor a piece of cancer, in my mind, the way I see it, and then it can sprout like a star and give out other ways of it exploring and expanding in your system. So I did the radical mastectomy, and I had to do chemo as part of my treatment. And I was so upset when they said I had to have chemo. And I was like, no, anything but chemo, please.
Yeah.
Well, I had to have chemo. I had 9 months that I was going to be listed up to take the treatments. And I didn't lose my hair this time all the way. I lost clumps of it. So I would go to work and wear a baseball cap and hide what I had. And my husband and I went and got a wig. And I didn't ever wear it. I wanted to be me I didn't need a wig, to go out in public. So my hair was just short and kind of thin. But when I had the chemo, I had one chemo to have, one chemo to take. And my husband would pick me up from work and take me. I'm glad through this this. And Scott would say, no, you have 8 more chemos to go through. And I say, no, I have 1 more. Because if I thought I had 8 more to go through, I didn't know if I could do it. But I knew I could go through 1 more.
Wow.
And that's the way I took my chemo. It took months longer than it should have, because of my blood count was not always as strong as it needed to be in order to take the chemo. But, taking one at a time let me get through it instead of taking 8 more. So that's the way I did get through that part of that terrible disease and that terrible time in my life.
Do you ever just sit and go, I think I'm good. Like, I've had enough. Like, death of a parent at a young age, lupus, violent attack by a serial murderer, and now breast cancer. I mean, you either have to think God has a sense of humor or be very unsure if he exists. Like, do you have those moments?
I have to keep running. Well, now that I'm older, I walk really fast because I know there's going to be a hurdle to jump. And on the other side of that hurdle is going to be something. And in my mind, it's going to be great. Although sometimes I'm wrong. And like breast cancer, I didn't see that coming from anywhere, and not having any history of it. And it was just, oh God, I got to get through this now.
Right. Here we go
not
again.
Thinking I never thought I wouldn't get through it. It was just, another thing I got to get through now. And I just took it in stride that way. And I never really thought much about why me or I can't do it. It was just like, it's in front of me. I'll have to handle it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, hats off to you. I'm so impressed. So your lupus is in remission. Is your cancer?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
good.
It's in a remission. Yes.
Good. So I have to ask, do you consider yourself a victim, a survivor, or somehow bits of both?
somehow both, I was victimized by Ted Bundy. He had a journey that he took a lot of women on, and he killed them on his journey. And he killed so many young women and took them away from this world so young that I wasn't going to go down his journey. He came into my room and knocked on my door and said, I'm going to do this, and you're part of my journey now. And I didn't accept that. I turned it into my journey.
Yes.
And my journey was a way of talking to people and healing and helping my family go through it. And that was something I wanted to do. So as a survivor, you've heard it before, I'm a thriver, because I thrive every day. I love what's going on. And of course, in this world today, it's challenging, but I've enjoyed everything I've experienced with my family. And of course, there's downtimes, of course, but I try to look positive and be positive, because I don't want to be stuck as that sick little kid, or the woman that had a mastectomy and laying in bed and taking chemo. I wasn't going to be that anymore. And in order to survive that, I had to be strong.
You are so strong. I am honestly blown away by your strength and by your ability to share and to be so honest. It's beautiful, and I'm really humbled that you would, do that with me here. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for inviting me and letting me tell my story. And hopefully people can hear it, and victims can know they're not alone, and their strengths, they can lean on it. Everyone has a strength inside of them. And when you've been victimized and when you think you're alone, you need to look deep inside of you, deep in your soul, and find that strength and pull it up. And that's yours now. No one can take it away from you. And you can use that when you're scared, or when something's going to happen and you have to do and you don't want to do it. Just wrap that strength around you and let you know, I can do this. I can do whatever it is that's facing me. And I found that to be a strong image that I used, and it did help me a lot.
Yeah, that is a great word. Thank you for that. Kathy, something I ask all my guests at the close of an interview is, what is keeping you up at night?
I mentioned before, I sleep pretty well.
Good.
I don't have images of things that have happened. I've been very fortunate that God has taken that away from me, and I'm positive. So I think of positive things, and, I'm just not going to go back to nasty and ugly and have it encompass me. I won't let that happen. So I sleep fine at night. I think of shopping or, going. That's a fun part to think about.
Absolutely. I'm with you.
But just things that make me feel good, and my family and memories. And that's how I sleep. I sleep pretty good at night.
That's beautiful, as you should. Thank you so much again for being on Dialogue Podcast, for sharing your story. And I really hope that CrimeCon is in person this year in Austin, because I will be there and I would love to meet you in person.
Thank you very much. I'll look forward to seeing you too.
Good. Thank you, Kathy. Dialogue is a Yellow Tape Media production, edited by Jason Usry and produced and hosted by me, Rebecca Sebastian. Please be sure to subscribe to Dialogue, a true crime conversation, wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media. We are at Dialogue Pod across all platforms. You can also drop me a note or a guest suggestion, or sign up for my newsletter at RebeccaSebastian.com. Be sure to join me every Wednesday for a new episode and another killer conversation.